Hi guys, my name is Breanna. This is for Public Health 205, Section 1016, and my research project was on concussions. What is a concussion? Concussions are traumatic brain injuries. They can be caused by a blow, jolt, or injury to the head. Examples of what could happen is someone falling and hitting their head. For example, an elderly person missteps and they just happen to hit their head. Another example would be someone tackling the opponent the wrong way. So like a head-to-head contact, which is very illegal now, or even tackling the right way, and then when you take down your opponent, they just happen to fall and hit their head wrong, and now they have a concussion. Here in the picture, you can kind of see what happens inside your head. You're going to have a rapid acceleration, and then very fast deceleration, as you can see. So the brain's going to end up hitting the front of your skull, and then rapidly hitting the back of your skull. Next. So here we have an example of a few examples of mechanism of injury. Mechanism of injury, if you don't know, is basically just how the injury happened. We're going to go ahead and try and play the video, but if not, and if it doesn't play, you can just go ahead and watch it yourself. So, yeah. Levels of consciousness. So, like with any injury, there's going to be levels. So with levels of concussions, grade 1 will be considered mild. Mild concussions are what you're mostly going to see. It's also going to be the less severe type of head injury. So anything listed after the what grade they are, it's going to be their symptoms. So for grade 1, we're going to have headaches, trouble focusing, memory loss, experiences dizziness, and then nausea. Like I said, mild is going to be the most common concussion that you're probably going to see. Grade 2 is moderate. So with moderate concussions, you're also going to experience some of the symptoms from grade 1. But with what makes grade 2 moderate is the experience of loss of consciousness. So that can last anywhere from a minute to 5 minutes. Again, because they went unconscious, this is a medical emergency. So also you're going to experience amnesia, ringing of the ears, and they may even become irritable. Like in grade 2, grade 3, you're also going to experience symptoms from grade 1 and grade 2, but what makes grade 3 severe is loss of consciousness for more than 5 minutes. There's no questioning it. This is a medical emergency and they need to be taken to the hospital immediately. So with this level, you're going to see symptoms of amnesia lasting longer than 24 hours and vomiting. Incidences, 2.87 million traumatic brain injuries, related visits, hospitalizations, and deaths just in the US alone happened in 2014. Concussions mostly occur for those over the age of 75. Like I said, you get older and you can have a misstep because your balance is not as good as when you were younger, so there's a chance of falling and hitting your head. Children between the ages of 0 to 4. So obviously around these ages, we're going to see a lot of kids learning how to control their bodies. They're still learning how to walk and just trying to understand what they all have. So there's no doubt that children are going to fall and hit their head. But at this age, especially when they're more of toddler, like little toddlers, it's going to be very hard to distinguish whether or not they've had a concussion, because obviously kids have a not problem, but they're still learning how to communicate how they're feeling. So it is more common in these areas, but it's also very hard to diagnose them having a concussion unless it's very prominent. So the next ages are going to be between the ages of 15 to 24 for for this, I consider this to be the prime years for athletes, because at 15 you're about starting the more intense level of sports, and to the age of 24 is about the last year you could see college athletes playing, because by the time of 24 they're like seniors in college. So these are going to be your prime ages you could see concussions in athletes. Also, girls are more prone to concussions than guys are. Sad fact, I know. So with that, it's because girls have smaller axons, which means they have fewer microtubules than guys do. So guys will have larger ones and have more microtubules. So that just, with that, it kind of entails that guys were made to be stronger, I guess. It just worked out that way, and since our microtubules are smaller, they're more prone to be injured each year. So with that, girls have a higher concussion rate, and their symptoms last longer than guys who participate in the same sports. So like the same sports could be soccer, lacrosse, and like rugby, like we seen in the video. So second impact syndrome. Second impact syndrome is getting another traumatic brain injury before you have fully recovered from your initial traumatic brain injury. Most times you're going to see it, if you do happen to see it, because it is rare, it's going to be directly after the first one has happened, and the medical professional didn't pull them and didn't see the signs, so they end up getting second impact syndrome. Like I said, it is a very rare injury, but this injury is most fatal. If you do get it, it is most fatal. Sad that it happens that way, but there's so much trauma to the brain in such a short period of time that I guess the brain kind of just shuts down. So if you do not pass away, you'll be left permanently disabled for the rest of your life. It's sad because, like I said, the traumatic injury is just so big in a short time span. You're going to end up killing brain cells, and parts of the brain are just going to start to die because it's like lack of oxygen, and it's swelling, and you're like bursting blood vessels, and there's just no room for your, like, if the swelling does happen, there's like nowhere for your brain to go. So death is going to be reported to overcome an individual between 2 to 5 minutes after getting the second one. With that short of time span between like the hit and then like passing away, there is going to be little to no time to stabilize the individual. So even if you did try to get them to the hospital, they will end up dying on the way. Treatments. You're going to want a lot of rest for the first 2 days, because that is a lot of stress on your head just in a short amount of time. So the doctors are going to recommend you rest. That does not mean we're going to lay in bed all day in the dark, try to exclude ourselves. No, we still want to be somewhat active and somewhat still trying to live our lives. But with that, you still want to limit like your screen time. So electronic devices, intense readings, even if it is just like relaxing, it still can be too much for someone, depending on the severity of their concussion. And then limiting your work. Work can be very stressful, so you're going to want to limit that. So with physical activity, you're going to want to not you should not be doing any sports, and you should avoid working out and going to the gym and any intense, vigorous movements. Days to follow, depending on the severity of your concussion, will determine where you will be with your treatments. If it's mild, you're probably gonna see yourself being fully recovered maybe after like 2 weeks completely. And we're gonna try to this is in most cases like athletes, because concussions you can mostly see in athletes before you see in like an adult coming in for concussion, but you're going to want to be cleared by your doctor first so that they see that you have rested and you are improving. So they're going to suggest that you slowly start implementing like light exercises and physical activities and little everyday stuff, but you still want to limit it to make sure you're not going to overwhelm yourself. Depending on how bad the concussion was, the doctor might recommend rehabilitation. Concussions are very serious, so there could be problems where it can mess with your vision, your balance, and even your thinking. I had an athlete once when I was in high school get tackled, hit his head really hard on the ground, and to us, like, it seemed like common sense, but at the time, this kid, like, to us, it was common sense, but to the kid, he, like, for a second, like, forgot how to open his eyes. Like, on that case, he didn't lose consciousness because he was still responding to us, but as a very high mild case. And then for headaches, because you're bound to have them because it is a head injury, you're going to want to take acetaminophen. So for that, you're going to want to take medication like Tylenol, but you want to stay away from blood thinners like ibuprofen. So because ibuprofen and blood thinners can increase your risk of bleeding. Solutions to concussions. As of recently, the NCAA and the NFL have put out new rules and regulations to like keep everyone safe and make sure that we are doing the best that they are doing the best that they can to like prevent concussions from happening altogether, because it's not covered in my project, but after so many concussions, especially in like a big contact sport, there had been cases of CTE, which is basically just a reason of passing away early because the brain has taken so much damage that you just start. There's just a lot of symptoms and it's a lot to cover. That could be like their own research project. But also, as of recently, there's been new equipment. So like new helmets have been tested and like pushed through to like to make sure it's like up to date and like safe. For like the trials and stuff, it showed that it was going to be very successful, but as of right now, there has not really been any like there's not enough proof to like show that these new helmets have been the reason to like reduce concussions. There's not enough studies on it yet, so you can't really tell. So since concussions are an internal thing, it's kind of hard to like control because concussions happen inside your skull, but everything we do to try to protect you and the athletes, it's all external. The protective gear, learning how to tackle properly, all those things, it's all external. So with that, we're going to try to do the best to prevent it, and if they do happen, we're going to try to do our best to like properly treat them and get them on their way to be safe and healthy again. So with that, we're going to want to make sure that we're wearing properly fitted protective equipment. There was a report that showed that only about 15 to 20% of athletes wear properly fitted gear. That's a really low statistic. That's about like 80 to 85 athletes going out to play their sport with too big of gear, too small of gear, or so on and so forth, and that's putting their health and their safety at risk because they just happen to wear the wrong gear or they weren't properly fitted. Another way to reduce concussions is not using your head as a main focal point for tackling. In tackling, we want to try our best to use our shoulders mostly and avoid using our head. Our head is literally what controls the rest of our body, so it's a very important factor. You're going to want to make sure all your protective equipment and gear is up to date with the new rules and regulations. I understand that, especially with under budgeted schools, it's kind of hard to do those things, but it's always important to try their best to get this new equipment, because you would rather want to spend the expensive amount of money on new equipment than a lawsuit because a kid got a concussion or ended up passing away because of not up-to-date equipment being used. Another thing is really important is educate. You want to educate yourself and others around you. A big thing would be, for me, is for football in high school, it was mandatory that the parents and students had to attend a safety meeting, because they wanted to go over the possibilities of what injuries could happen during this sport, especially concussions. Since concussions are such a big deal, they want to make sure that everyone is getting this information, because yes, the coaches can send home a flyer about concussions, but especially kids in high school, I wouldn't trust them to read it. Athletes at this age is all about playing and just trying to get scouted, so they worry about their health and their safety last because they're too busy trying to be, the best athlete out there. They don't really care for that injury until it actually happens. And then here are my references.